The centuries weighed heavy on him. Bloodlust, once a raging fire, had dulled into smoldering ash. He had tasted the lifeblood of kings, drained empires of their heirs, and left whole villages as pale corpses in his wake. But immortality had become his curse, and the faces of the dead haunted his every thought. To escape, he abandoned his monstrous nature, shunning humanity altogether. In the form of a bat, he soared through the night, a fleeting shadow in a world no longer his. The wind whispered around him, a cruel mockery of the freedom he thought he'd found. But then came the sharp whistle of death, a hunter's arrow, sleek and merciless, tearing through the delicate membrane of his wing. Agony erupted, a white-hot flash that surged through his tiny form. He spiraled downward, the ground rushing up to meet him, and he crashed into the underbrush with a pained, guttural hiss. Writhing in the dirt, his instincts flared. Hunger, rage, pain. He shifted weakly into his humanoid form, his trembling hands clawing at the earth as his vision blurred. He could hear the hunter's footsteps approaching, steady and cruel. The scent of the man's blood filled the air, thick and tantalizing. The predator in him surged, drowning out reason. If he could feed, he could heal. He would tear the hunter's throat out and drink deeply, as he had done so many times before. His fangs bared as the man came into view, his weapon lowered in smug satisfaction. Just as he lunged forward, desperate for the lifeblood that would restore him, a soft voice broke through the haze. "Wait!" The girl, small, bright-eyed and utterly out of place, rushed between him and the hunter. Her sudden appearance startled them both. The man hesitated, scowling, while the vampire staggered back, the fight within him faltering. She saw only a wounded creature, broken and pitiable, and knelt before him with unyielding kindness. The hunter cursed under his breath, lowering his weapon and retreating into the woods. "Not worth it," he muttered, disappearing into the shadows. The vampire glared after him, weak and furious. If not for her, he could have ended the threat then and there. She carried him home, her gentle hands trembling as she bore the weight of a predator she could not yet recognize. She placed him on a small wooden table, his body still trembling in its wounded state. As she prepared to tend his wounds, the air shifted, shadows thickened, and the room grew cold. Before her astonished eyes, the bat began to stretch, to contort, to reshape. A sickening crackle of bone and sinew filled the air. When it was over, a man stood before her, clothed in tattered, dark garments that seemed almost a part of the shadows themselves, his eyes black as the abyss. She blinked, frozen in disbelief. This isn't real," she whispered. But when her gaze fell to the mirror on the wall, she gasped. The man's reflection was absent. Her hand flew to her mouth as understanding dawned. The legends, the warnings whispered by old women in her village. He was one of them, a monster, a vampire. Instead of fleeing, she approached him cautiously. "You're hurt," she said softly. His lips curled into a bitter smile, revealing elongated canines. "You know what I am, yet you do not scream, foolish child." "I know you're hurt," she replied, unshaken, "and I can help." For days she tended to him, never flinching at his sinister presence. He told her fragments of his story, of centuries spent hiding in the shadows, subsisting on the blood of animals to avoid his darker instincts. She offered her own blood, pressing her wrist to his lips one evening, but he recoiled with a snarl. "I will not," he hissed. "Your kindness is your curse, girl. Do not tempt the predator." As the days passed, his wounds began to mend. Though a vampire's body healed swiftly, his self-imposed starvation had slowed the process to a crawl. Finally, when the last of his strength returned, he vanished before dawn, leaving her only silence. But he did not leave entirely. From the darkened woods, he watched her, her every step, her every smile. She had rekindled something buried within him, something fragile and alien, a flicker of humanity. One evening, an old man appeared at her door, his hunched frame casting a long shadow in the fading light. "Miss," he rasped, "I've broken my gardening tool. Could you spare a moment to help?" From the trees, the vampire's instincts stirred. The man's voice was wrong, too smooth, too rehearsed. His kind eyes masked something foul. Stepping from the shadows, the vampire materialized behind her, his whisper icy against her ear. "Send him away," he warned. She glanced at him, frowning. "He's just an old man, not everyone is dangerous." Her naivety stung him, but he withdrew, letting her make her choice. he would not interfere with the purity of her kindness. He was wrong. The old man was no gardener. That night, her screams shattered the stillness. The vampire arrived too late. Her lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor, her blood painting the walls like a grotesque mural. As he looked closer, his sharp eyes caught the faint gleam of the weapon on the man's belt, the same weapon that had shot him down as a bat. The truth struck him like a dagger. The old man, the robber, was the same hunter who had hurt him. If he had killed the man that night in the woods, she would still be alive. A rage consumed him. He hunted the man relentlessly, a shadow of death stalking the night. When he found him, the human whimpered and begged, but mercy was no longer in the vampire's vocabulary. He tore into the man with feral rage, savoring every scream, every drop of blood spilled. When the robber's broken body lay silent, the vampire returned to the girl's home, now a silent mausoleum. He stood where her body had lain, his gaze falling on her blood-stained floor. Her kindness, once a beacon in his endless darkness, now seemed hollow, a fragile illusion shattered by human cruelty. "There is no kindness," he growled, his voice dripping with venom. "Only prey and predator." His fists clenched as a storm of rage and despair surged within him. The centuries he had spent suppressing his nature, denying the beast within, felt like a mockery. He had tried to retreat, to exist unnoticed, but the world had reminded him of its brutality. "No more hiding, no more mercy," he hissed, his black eyes burning with renewed hunger. "Let them fear me again." And with that, he turned from the house, his silhouette melting into the shadows. The predator he once was had awakened, and the world would tremble under his wrath. Where there had been hesitation, there was now resolve. He was not a man to be redeemed, nor a monster to be forgotten. He was eternal, and he was hungry.